Hey everyone, welcome back to our final video in the Psychological Capital series. I may make one short video next week just to kind of recap some things. But today we're talking about optimism. It's the fourth component of psychological capital and completes our hero within. So we had hope, efficacy, resilience, and now optimism to complete the hero within concept that we talk about in psychological capital. So, optimism is defined as a positive psychological outlook related to events and capabilities. Optimistic individuals view internal capabilities as being used to contribute positively to a situation, and that negative outcomes are more external and situational. So, we'll unpack this as we go through the slides. So just kind of first thinking about what might identify someone as being an optimistic person. What are those characteristics or things that we see? So optimistic people see challenges and setbacks as opportunities to learn. So rather than getting frustrated and kind of bogged down in failure, a person who exhibits optimism would see some kind of challenge or failure as an opportunity to learn something and kind of take the positive things away from that rather than dwell on the negative. Typically, optimistic people also have high positive expectations that things will work out. So just kind of thinking through, any kind of situation. I need to drive a long distance. Things are just going to work out. I have a big upcoming international travel trip planned, and I'm sure things will work out. So just kind of having those expectations that things will work out. Even though there might be challenges or setbacks or things that happen along the way, ultimately they see that in the end, things will work out. Optimistic people tend to be grateful. They can recognize gratitude in situations. So even thinking through, again, those times where something negative might happen, they're grateful for having had the experience. They're grateful for having met a person in that situation, or maybe given the opportunity to try something at all. So they look for opportunities and ways to be grateful in every situation. Another characteristic is that optimistic people are able to take responsibility for their mistakes and move past them. So instead of making a mistake and thinking, oh, I'll probably keep making the same mistake over and over, they can say, I know what I did wrong. Here's where this went off course. I'm going to move past the mistakes onto a new idea. And so I really like the picture I found where you can see kind of the crumpled paper, idea after idea, mistake after mistake, but still the light bulb is on. Still there's this positive outlook on trying something again, even if you make another mistake. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how can you become optimistic in kind of this framework of learned optimism and realistic optimism. So Martin Seligman is one of the kind of leading theorists on optimism, and I've referenced his book in here and included it on my final slide. So he talks about that optimism can be learned. It's not a trait that you're born with necessarily. So it's not like you're either optimistic or pessimistic and you're stuck that way. If you're a pessimistic person, you can become more optimistic. Partly by doing some of the things I just talked about, looking at challenges as opportunities to learn, taking a mistake or failure and saying that was a one-time thing, move on. So a lot of optimism has to do with perspective. And so Seligman talks about the 3 Ps: personalization, pervasiveness, and permanence. So personalization and optimism is looking at what internally, like what internal capabilities you brought to a situation that contributed to like positive or negative outcomes. So an optimistic person would look at a situation that they're in, and if something failed, they don't necessarily internalize that. They would say, I brought the best I could to that situation, or I did all of the things that I was capable of doing. If failure was still the end result, that had something to do with external things outside of myself. So they're less likely to personalize negative outcomes. Pervasiveness is just kind of that thought of, is this invading, right, every aspect of your life? So kind of looking at, if I failed at something at work, I'm probably also a bad parent, right? So it's kind of like something that went wrong in one place is going to be, we're going to see that in a relationship with a spouse or a child or something. And so we're kind of taking one thing and saying this is seen then everywhere in my life. And permanence is that it's not going away. I can't fix it. So it's kind of thinking through things like some sort of event happens to you, like let's say you lose your job. The personalization of that would be, there's something wrong with me. Okay, so you take the job loss and you internalize that. That would be a pessimistic view. Pervasiveness would say, I'm also a bad parent. Permanence would be saying something like, I'll never get another job. I'll never be a good mother. Okay, so you're kind of saying this is something that I can never, ever fix. So when we think about optimism, it has so much to do with perspective and how you see the world around you, the events around you, and also your involvement in those events and what you're even capable of and how that impacts the outcome of the event. Which leads us into realistic optimism. And I have these as kind of like two things pitted against each other, and they're not necessarily, they could be, but I think you can take learned optimism, trying to become more optimistic, but also having a realistic view of optimism. Realistic optimism includes an evaluation of what is even possible in a given situation. Okay, so I could be an optimist and say that every time I get on an airplane, things are going to work out. I have high expectations. The plane is always going to take off on time. It's going to fly on the right course. We're never going to veer off course. Everything is going to go great as far as the landing, and things are going to be great. It's going to be a good flight, no turbulence, no crying babies, and I can get some work done or sleep or read, right? And I have all these positive thoughts and feelings and emotions about my flight. Realistic optimism would also say, if something went wrong, I can't fly the plane. I don't have the capability or knowledge. I have the capabilities, I guess. I don't have the knowledge to fly a plane. So I can't make things come out okay. If something does go wrong, that's not my fault. So really thinking about taking optimistic thoughts and feelings, but being realistic about the expectations that you can have and kind of managing what is possible. So I've got the rose-colored glasses here with sort of this reflection to think through. You can see the world through rose-colored glasses and see things as always going to be working out great and everything is pink and lovely, but also reflect on what is possible. Optimism as a resource allows you to see that even if today was challenging, tomorrow will be better. So there's also this futuristic thinking that one negative event or one negative outcome doesn't mean the next challenge I face will be negative or that tomorrow's challenges will be negative. I'm probably not even using the word challenge. If I'm an optimist, I'm thinking about them as opportunities. But the next thing I'm involved in isn't going to go poorly just because the first thing I did this morning went poorly. So really thinking through from an optimistic perspective, what are the things that you personally have control over and have the capability to change? And what are the things that could go wrong that have nothing to do with you internally? They are external forces that impact the outcome in a negative way. Of course, I'll end with a quote. Martin Seligman said this: "Positive thinking is the notion that if you think good thoughts, things will work out well. Optimism is the feeling of thinking things will be well and hopeful." So what I hope for all of you is that you have been able to watch this entire series. There's 5 parts to the series. And think about how you can develop these components: hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism, as you become a better leader and develop your leader abilities.